Down to business.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Whiskey Musings broadcast. I am your ethereal, coming to you from the ethereal plane as your corporeal host, Rick. So tonight, I want to take a little bit of a divergent path to go into the unexplainable. And I'm going to bring you three instances within my own life where I have found or heard or seen things that are a little, let's say, strange and unexplainable from the standpoint of being able to understand what was going on at the time. And I encourage you that if you do have some stories that a little bit later on, I'm going to open up the phone lines and I would encourage you to give me a call because to be honest with you, I think all of us have a fascination with something that is unexplainable. Now, whether or not you lean into it from a religious standpoint or whether or not you look at it more in more of an agnostic type of way, you have to admit that as science has moved along in today's day and age, there are things about this world that we even now truly do not understand. And it is those things that back in the day, realistically, not that long ago, would have seemed like they were things that we didn't understand back then, and so it could be considered magic. And we've since found out things like science and have been able to explain. And let me give you an example. An example was, early on, people who were trying who were practicing alchemy, were trying to transfer lead into gold. And now we know that today that is not possible because of the fact that, we have things like science that is basically explained to us that you can't transmute from one element into another. So alchemy by itself was just something that people explored. The other thing that a lot of people didn't understand was, in terms of the universe, could have been like lunar eclipses, for an example. We now know today that basically the lunar eclipse is essentially the sun, or sorry, the moon moving in between the sun and the earth. And so we know that as a lunar eclipse today, but way back in the day, they didn't understand that. They didn't even understand or know necessarily about the moon and how it runs in its elliptical course around the earth, and how the earth itself runs in an elliptical course around the sun and changes things around. We know those to be true today, mainly based on science. But yet I still believe that there are certain parts of our world that we still have yet to understand or explain. And so tonight, I'm going to bring to you three short stories of my own past where I've experienced something that I definitely cannot explain. And to be honest with you, if you end up seeing what I have for those three stories, if you end up seeing or knowing the answer, by all means, please, go ahead and let me know, because I would be sort of interested in it. But given the fact that I haven't been able to explain them so far, and there really isn't any other explanation that I can come up with, I honestly, seriously believe that I am not going to be able to explain these things, and even after I get to the point of death. We all think about things in terms of like an afterlife. We like to look forward to something beyond just what we have here today. And so from that standpoint, I encourage the thought process in understanding that there is more to this world than what we have available to us in terms of our knowledge and understanding. And so, you know, I'm going to ask for a tiny bit of suspension of disbelief here. But that being said, I just want to give you three specific examples that I can think of from my past, that I can tell you right now, I still to this day don't fully understand what was going on at the time, when it happened. So, with that, I'm going to go ahead and slide over, and you'll notice my background is going to change here in a second because I actually want to get a little bit into the mood. So, let me step to the side and I'll show you what I found here. And as you can see, goes surreal. So I'm gonna guess. That's a hint at what I'm gonna be talking about. Now I'm gonna try something new here. Give me just a second. I want to try something a little new. This might get a little loud. I apologize, but we're gonna try it. That's right. Got to get a little mood music going here. Hopefully you guys can hear me over the top of it. I'm going to slide it down just a little bit more. Okay. So this first story comes from my childhood, and I don't know if anybody remembers the Ouija board. The Ouija board was a game that came out. It was actually produced by Parker Brothers, and it was a game that came out, I'm not exactly sure when, but I found it in our closet. And it was kind of interesting because I had never played it before. And so there were some friends of ours that came over, some cousins, that kind of stuff. We all kind of got together. And these, in using this particular game, as it were, and just for those that don't know, let me just go ahead and show. This is the Ouija board. And this is actually a pretty good representation of what it looked like when I was using it. So the Ouija board, essentially what you did is, as you can see, there's that little yellow spade-looking platform. And what you essentially did is what it's showing you in the bottom corner. Let's see if I can point to it here. Whoops. Let's go this side. Nope, I can't. Okay, so it's in the bottom corner. You can see where people put their fingers, their hands on it, and you all just kind of get together and you try to essentially summon a spirit from the other side. And honestly, what ended up happening at the time was we had a group of us together, and at the time, we started, just kind of fooling around with it and that kind of thing, and it was pretty cool. But then, at one point in the game, we all took our fingers off of it, and at that moment, the spade-looking plastic object started moving on its own and started spelling out a name that I didn't recognize, and neither did anybody else in the room really recognize. And so it was very, very strange. And it started, pointing out letters, and then it went to move to numbers, and it was all moving on itself, and we all kind of got scared. And so we literally everybody just sort of, jumped up, and we all, some of the girls that were in the room, they all started screaming and everything else. My parents didn't even know what the heck was going on. They basically asked me what was happening, and I ended up where I explained to them what I had found, and I spoke to them a little bit about it, and they essentially kind of laughed it off. But I can guarantee you this much: I have never touched a Ouija board since. And this thing, I'm going to tell you, this thing it scared literally the bejesus out of me. I don't think I can even explain or understand how this thing even did what it did. Because honestly, there's no semblance of magnets. There's no strings. There weren't any tricks. We just pulled it out and read the directions, and jumped right on and started playing this game. And then next thing you know, this thing started moving on its own. And yeah, I couldn't even think about it anymore. I couldn't even think about it today. So that's my first story, and that happened when I was probably about a teenager when that happened. Totally unexplainable. Totally unexplainable. Still, even to this day, I don't even understand what happened. So now, I'm going to move on and I'm going to change my mood music here. So we're going to move on to the next story. And this one's actually pretty sad. In fact, the music in the background, if you can hear it, is titled Spirit of the Dead. And it's very apropos for this particular part of my storytelling for this. So when I was in the service, I was able to travel to Germany. And going into Germany, we were over there for an exercise. And the exercise at the time, this was in 1991, and so it was, we were over there for about a couple months, a good couple months. And it was at the end of September when we arrived, and it went from September into almost December. And during that time frame, we did get an opportunity to go on a few tours. Now, I got a chance to go into Berlin and see some of the where the old Berlin Wall was, and I got to see some of the castles and some of the old architecture that was around. And it was very, very, in my opinion, it was very quaint. It was cool to watch and to go see because of the fact that it was, very very gothic, very old, very, it was incredible architecture, just absolutely wonderful experience. But the other trip that I was able to go on, we went and visited, it was in Bremen, and we went and visited one of the sites of the concentration camps. Now, the one that everybody seems to know and recognize and remember, obviously, is Auschwitz, and it wasn't that one, I can tell you that much, but it was a smaller one. It was in Bremen. And the thing that struck me most is we got off the tour bus, and it was a nice fall day. Now, to give you in a sense, for anybody that lives here in the Pacific Northwest, our typical fall days are very similar to what you find over in Germany. Now, we were a little bit north in Germany, but still, the days, the general feeling, the weather in the air, it was a clear day. It was warm enough for me not to be running around with a jacket on. And we got off the bus. We all kind of formed up outside the walls, and the person who was doing the tour basically kind of told us a little history of this location. And the thing that struck me about this was the walls and the big iron gates that they had in the front that they had open for us to go in. And one of the things that I found was going into the space, there was a complete difference in temperature as you walked through the gate. Now, keep in mind that going through the gate was no change, no discernible change in terms of the air, because it wasn't like you were going from outside to inside. We walked in, and you walked into an open air space, and so there wasn't any heaters on the outside. There wasn't any AC units on the inside. It was just crossing like you would be crossing your gate or fence in any other part of the world. But there was a significant difference in the temperature between the outside and the inside of these walls. And as I was walking through, and the tour guide was kind of showing us what was going on, I mean, we went and we actually saw where they had showers, and the showers were obviously, like we've all heard, they had, gas in the shower head, so you would think you're going in to take shower and you would instead be gassed. They had chains and these big, massive rings on the outside of the wall to where you would go up and you'd get chained up as you're waiting for the next step into the showers and that. And it was very, very surreal, very creepy. But further on down in the open space, there were these mass graves, and these mass graves, they were nothing more than mounds of dirt with these plaques in front of them. And the plaques in front had numbers on them. Like one of them had between 100,000 and 150,000. And what that was an estimate of how many bodies were actually in that grave. They didn't know. They honestly do not know how many actual bodies and bones are buried in those spaces. They just know that they're all just tossed in there, and they didn't even know, what was there. So, again, coming back out, it was very chilly, and it felt chilly. Not necessarily just the temperature in the air, and it wasn't like a cold chill, like I would have to put on a coat. There wasn't any breeze or anything to speak of. It was just a very noticeable temperature change from the outside to the inside of these walls. And going back out was exactly the same way. It went from cold into warm. And it's very, very weird. Very, very strange. So that's my second brush with what I would consider something that I honestly cannot explain, because it just boggles my mind as to why that's even there. And, somebody might even say that was psychological, but for whatever reason, it was just the way that I felt going into this space and coming back out of this space. And so now, this is my third story, my third brush with the unexplained. In this particular case, this was really not that long ago. But I used to have a dog, and this dog, he was a yellow lab, great dog. His name was Jake, and he didn't have any kind of a habit of barking or excessively or anything else. I mean, for the most part, he was a really decent dog. He would bark, obviously, if somebody came down our driveway or something along those lines, if he'd seen somebody on the road, that type of thing. But this one day, my wife and I were sitting there, and he was laying in his bed, and he all of a sudden just sort of did like this half sit up and flipped his head up and gave off a very, very lonely wolf-like howl that lasted for probably a good 20 seconds or so. And he had never howled before. He had barked, but he had never, ever howled. And he never howled after this either. This is the one and only time that he actually howled. Now, I fully expected to hear like the sirens, a fire engine going by, because oftentimes that can set off dogs and cause them to howl. I know it sets off coyotes and stuff, but in this particular case, it didn't. There was nothing that went by. And I could, my wife and I couldn't explain it. But come to find out, a little while later, in terms of time, is probably about maybe 30 minutes after he had howled, and we don't know specific times, but we had received word that my wife's mother had passed. And the only explanation that both my wife and I can come up with, because he actually did really like, he really, really liked her. The only explanation that we can come up with is the fact that somehow, some way, he knew that she had passed and was giving her a send-off of some type. And again, like I said, it's totally unexplainable as far as understanding that this dog had never howled before and only howled that one time during the entire course of his 14 years. And it just so happened to have been close to, or perhaps even on, the moment of her death. Now, this seems to be, this is sort of an interesting little scenario that I've given you. I've given you um, three different actual times where, in my life, where I've hit sort of what you can consider the paranormal, and this would be considered the occult. Now, you know. Tonight's episode is not just about whether or not you've had brushes with death or ghosts or anything along those lines, but it's even beyond that. I mean, some people have seen UFOs. Some people have seen Bigfoot. Some people have seen strange things that they just don't understand out in the woods, or even, just a glimpse, a corner, something out of the corner of their eye, and they can't see it. Now, I personally, I'm not inclined to necessarily lean toward, um, an unexplained event. Most of the time, I would say that I would generally tend to think that I um, tend to lean more towards the idea that everything is explainable in some way, shape, or form. The challenge here, of course, is the fact that these three events in particular are defy my level of knowledge and understanding. That I cannot, for the life of me, come up with a a reason as to why this actually has occurred. And so, that being said, and I'm sorry, I just found out that I had my mic muted. I apologize. I hope a lot of that came through. Um, but anyway, so these three events that I had go through are beyond my understanding and knowledge, and they're beyond what I can comprehend and understand. And so, basically, from that standpoint, I'm at a loss to even try and explain these events. I really am. I'm at a loss. So if you can understand it, if you kind of figured it, can figure it out. I mean, the Ouija board as an example, understanding how that dang thing works, that would be really, really interesting to me. But I honestly, I can't explain it. I cannot explain these events. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone lines, obviously. So if you have something strange that you may have experienced, something strange that you may know about, something that um, you haven't been able to fully understand, call, tell me about it. Let me know, because as of right now, I can't explain those three separate things in my life as to what they happen. And I think that there are times where we see things, and or we hear things, or um, things happen, and we just can't explain it. So anyway, so those are my three. So lines are open. I got 3 phone lines. Understanding and being able to step outside the box and realize that we are not going to understand everything, that we have to us, that there is so much more for us to go beyond. And you see videos all the time. Like, for an example, there's the video that just was released not too long ago about a UFO. And, that UFO kind of looked like a Star Wars TIE fighter, from what was purported to be a video of from a fighter jet that had started following it. We have conversations and we still have people thinking that the Roswell incident happened and the aliens are in Area 51. We have all kinds of different things that we just cannot explain. There's, TV shows, paranormal, and that kind of stuff. And people go and they look around and they try to find things within our world that are just amazing, to be honest. Um, from that standpoint, I guess I seriously do believe that there are things in this world that we cannot explain. And I'm going to make a reach out to my to my folks, and this is going to sound a little morbid, but hey, if you guys are get to the other side and you figure out a way to come back and let us know that there is an additional thing beyond just this life, um, I think that would be awesome. I think that would be spectacular if you get the opportunity to do that. And understanding one's lack of understanding in this world is another large um, key piece that I think that we need to focus on. I mean, science has basically proven that even though we live in the third dimension, that there actually is another dimension out there. There's the fourth dimension, and in some cases the fifth dimension, and there are so many different ways that things within our natural universe um, could be different than what we have today and what we understand today. I mean, we don't even know, 20 years from now, things might change. We may find something new and something different. Um, there's people who have said that they have seen loved ones when they're in comas. And whether that's a trickery of the mind and the subconscious, or whether that's an actual event, I think is something amazing. It's something that we need to maybe focus on, or maybe we need to realize that there are things that are beyond our comprehension at this point, and that our comprehension is going to grow over time, and we're going to be able to figure these kinds of things out. I mean, we still have a fascination with it. I think a small fascination in everybody's mindset with it, because otherwise these shows and things wouldn't be popular. I mean, here's an example that people talk about Bigfoot and how Bigfoot and the Yeti, they couldn't possibly exist. But yet, if you think about this, okay, there are areas even within our own state that here in Washington and some in Oregon that there are not people that live in those areas, and that you can move through that area and never even know whether or not something else is there. Um, you could, in theory, go and find things. There was a post that I think my brother-in-law put up about something that looked like a humanoid hand that had been chewed on. And granted, I mean, it could be fake, but there's still even videos produced today um, about Bigfoot itself. Uh, and one of them being up in the Northeast, there was a police officer, a couple of police officers that were driving down the road, and their dash cam caught what appeared to be a humanoid running across the road. And they got a little bit farther down the road, and they ended up, they couldn't find a place to turn around right away. And once they did, they came back, and it was gone. But there are certain occurrences that happen, and I think that we would be able to um, look at those occurrences, look at those events, and understandably realize that there is so much about our universe that we still do not fully understand or fully comprehend, that we could easily be missing a lot of things. Um, so anyway, so you know whether or not these events actually exist or whether or not they can be explained away by science is all up to, time, I guess, and our knowledge and understanding and comprehension. But I can tell you this much, that at one point animals were thought of as dumb, as an example, but I've been able to see and identify that animals do have a bit of a personality, and that each animal, regardless of the type of species it is, does have its own little idiosyncrasies, which could be related to a personality. Now, I won't go so far as to say that they have a soul or self acknowledgement uh, beyond just understanding that they are what would be considered alive. However, that being the case, there are differences within their personality structure. And you couldn't have that if there wasn't something further at work here in terms of life and how things are put together. Um, I know we've had science fiction films where you have the dogs that talk and that kind of thing, and that would be hilarious. It obviously is, because we put it into our movies for entertainment. But what if we were to find out that these animals had more to them than just what we figured they did, as a general sense? We can't possibly be the only sentient beings on this planet and not understand that there are other factors within this world to fully understand the relationship of these animals and the human beings and the spirits and the earth. And whether you call that religion or whether you call it something different, I think, personally, I think religion is, in a sense, man's search for what can be explained or make sense to them in the face of something that is not quite explainable. And I think we've seen this on multiple occasions throughout the course of history, that men have tried to explain things, and whether they come out to be true or not really doesn't make a difference. The fact is that man has always searched and strived to figure out our world and to figure out what's going on. And even today, we still think that we know, for an example, all of the species that are available within the oceans, but yet there's places within the oceans that we have never been and can never get to with current technology today, because of the fact that it is so cold and so deep, that we're just not able to reach those places and see what is down there and what kinds of things could we run across. Now, I'm not suggesting that there could be, like another humanoid species somewhere, other than maybe Bigfoot. But as far as, an intelligent humanoid species, I'm not even sure if there would be one within our own world. But we have areas of this earth that we haven't even explored yet, that we haven't been able to explore because of our own things that we cannot do, or we cannot even withstand. So things like, for an example, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Jules Verne wrote that in a book, and he created this world, but yet there could completely be something underneath the crust of the earth that hasn't been discovered yet, that very well could possibly be something like that. Now, I'm not suggesting that, dinosaurs ended up there, or anything else that you see in the movies or read in a book or whatever, but still, the point being is that our world, however large it is also however small it is, and yet we still haven't reached out to every single location. We still haven't explored all of the depths of understanding throughout everything that we have. And the creation that had that made this particular scenario or made this space. Just to be able to be here is a thought process that I don't think that any of us can actually even wrap our heads around, because it is just so vast of an idea that it's beyond our own comprehension as of today. And things that we knew back in the old days, I mean, look at, Galileo figured out that the sun was the center of the universe. And if you look at what he had available to him at the time in order to do that, the technology wasn't that great there. And there's things that, Benjamin Franklin, I mean, the Mayans, the pyramids, there's so many things that even though we could look at and we could think about that being explainable, they're not explained even to this day. With all of our knowledge and understanding of the world, we don't have a full grasp yet on everything that we have here. So, our experiences that we take, that we see, that we feel, that we hear, some of those things that we cannot explain today may be explainable tomorrow, but they very well could be what we consider paranormal experiences, very well could be something that is within our world that's trying to show us that there's something more, that there's something beyond what we currently understand. And yet the human race has the audacity to believe that we are superior to other things on this planet, and that we have the cornerstone on our science and our technology, and we're arrogant, I think, overall in the thought process that we know all of these things, and yet there's so much that we don't know. We haven't been able to acknowledge the things that we don't know more so than the things that we know. As I've been going along in my career, one of the things that I've found is that, after 20 years of doing what I do, that there comes a point in time where you sort of go through phases. So the first phase, you don't really know what you know. And the second phase, you realize that, hey, I know things that are going on. I know certain things. And then you hit this phase where you're like, I know it all. I know I am the expert. I know. And then there's a phase that is after that one that basically shows you in some way, shape, or form that you don't know how much you actually don't know. And it's that same simple thought process that I think that human beings go through in today's world, and especially with things like paranormal experiences, things that we can't explain, that kind of stuff, that I think is just amazing to me, that we are so arrogant to believe or to think that we have a grasp on every possible conceivable situation in this world, and that there isn't something more, there isn't something beyond our own understanding of what's happening within this space. And it's those times in life that you get humbled by something that, science finds and looks at and realizes that some of our assumptions are wrong. I mean, we all have a good example or a good idea of what the scientific theory is. And that's the thing, is that it's just a theory. It's just a theory. In a lot of cases, until it's been proved out. And once we prove it out over time or over consistency and repeatability, then it becomes either facts or law, or however that works out. But the key here, though, is to understand that we have less of a grasp on our world than what we truly believe that we do. And yet we seem, as a human race, we seem to have a bit of an arrogance when it comes to things that are different, that are changing, that are not what we normally understand, especially us in the West. I mean, think about this, even just in medicine. Let's just focus on just medicine for just a second. There are things the Eastern um, that the Eastern medical people do that here in the West we believe is just, doesn't work. It's crackpot. I mean, acupuncture. We are now starting to realize that acupuncture actually does have some merit to it. Chiropractic was another one, and we're here in the West. We've started to realize that there is merit to it, and so for us to be, from the human race, to be arrogant enough to think that we have a full grasp and understanding within our world based on science, based on technology, and things change every single day, that to think that we don't even know about the paranormal, about things that we don't understand or that we see and we cannot comprehend, is, in my mind, ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous for that to be the case. And yet you see it all the time. You see arrogant scientists who, look at things and they say, oh, no, no, that's, something, whatever it is not possible because we've studied it and it's not possible today. But to understand or to think that in this world, there is more to it. There's more to this world than what we can imagine. And whether you consider that, a supreme being, God, Allah, whatever it is, the fact remains that there are things in this world that are totally unexplainable by our current level of knowledge and understanding and technology, to be able to actually see clearly, to understand what our world is like. It's just an amazing thought to think about. And again, as I started this episode, three things happened to me. Ouija board that moved all by itself with no contact to it. My experience in Bremen, walking into the gate at the concentration camp and the temperature across the gates. And then this last thing in terms of a tie-in with an animal, my dog howling pretty much at the moment of my wife's, my mother-in-law's death. And these are things that are unexplainable to me even to this day. Can't go back and scientifically tear them apart either, because of the fact that the Bremen concentration camp, I could if I went back to it. The Ouija board, I could if I wanted to, but I'm not really interested in doing that. The dog, absolutely not, because Jake's gone and so is she. So we couldn't recreate that. But all of these things are unexplainable incidences in my life that I personally have experienced. And I'm going to bet that there are some things in your life that you can't understand either. Yeah. Astral projection. Ken popped it up in one of the chats here. Astral projection. Yes. If you're thinking about referring to something like what you see in the Doctor Strange movie or something along those lines, I'm not exactly sure whether, again, I don't know. I don't know whether or not that's even possible. But it does beg the question, though, because I've had people come up to me who have been to Asian countries who have basically said that, they have seen things like a old man repel a younger man who is a much bigger and stronger man without even touching him. And that's something that is beyond our comprehension. So, even within scientific realms, talking about the mind, how much the mind actually has capability of doing that we don't even touch is another thing that we haven't even fully explored or explained. Um, there's people who can heal with their hands, and there's people who can feel heat from people's hands, and they are not even touching their body. So, there again, there's just so much in this world that is not really explainable. Um, and mine are just like very, very minor from that standpoint. Anyway, so pretty much from that standpoint, I think this is this is an interesting discussion and something to think about for you in the other fashion. Um, in a way that we don't understand what's going on and how things occur within our world, and maybe be a little more accepting of those that encounter those types of things within our world. Maybe not be as dismissive of somebody who says that they've seen something or heard something that is unexplainable, because we don't have all of the answers. We don't have everything that is available to us today, even within our own technology. I mean, believe me, our knowledge and technology has come so far, so fast in the last 30, 40 years, even within certain people's lifetimes. Um, but to sit here and to say that we have a full grasp and understanding on everything is an arrogance that I cannot subscribe to. Cannot subscribe to. So anyway, so I don't really have much of anything else. I want to give a shout out to my 9 subscribers on YouTube, to my regulars that come in on the broadcast on the Facebook, on my Facebook account. I've seen a couple people pop in and out on the Periscope TV scenario, but I'm going to reach out to you. This is my 11th episode, and I'd like to continue to keep this going. I ask that you do me a favor, because the only way that I get any kind of advertisement right now is basically from you. So if you could reach out to other people, let them know that I'm out here, point them to the YouTube channel so they can look back at the older episodes that I've got, and spread the word. If you enjoy what I'm doing, if you enjoy what I'm talking about, and again, as always, like or subscribe to the. Let me go ahead and put this other one up. Like or subscribe. Subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Twitter. And then also keep in mind that if you have an idea for a program, if you have an idea, a topic for the program, please send me an email. My email is rick@whiskey musings, WHISKEY, musings, MUSINGS, .online or .net, and give me drop me a line. Let me know. If you are friends with me on Facebook, tag me up there. If you find the Facebook Whiskey Musings broadcast page, you can even drop a comment there if there is a topic that interests you. Even if it's something that you don't think that I'm gonna know anything about, I promise you, I do research. I do check things out. And as you can tell, I do have a opinion, just like everybody else does. So, do me a favor, pass this along, let people know. I'd like to see this grow. And I'd really like to continue doing this. I personally think it's a lot of fun. And I appreciate everyone who is watching. I appreciate everybody who has been here from the start. And even if you don't catch the live stream, I do keep them up on the YouTube channel, the Whiskey Musings YouTube channel, the Whiskey Musings broadcast, and you can go back and view all of my episodes and take a look at them. I try to keep it to about an hour, unless, the topic gets hot. Then, of course, we may go a little bit longer, but it's every Saturday night, 8 p.m. Pacific, right here. And with that, I think I'm going to let you guys go. You guys have a wonderful weekend. I wish you all good night. And I thank you again for joining. And remember to subscribe and to let your friends know that this is out here. Good night.